Welcome, everybody. This is our HBR webinar, and we'll be starting in just one moment. And we'll be going through with our webinar for about 45 minutes talking, and then we'll have about a 15-minute Q&A session. So you can ask questions in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we'll come to those. If they're something that we can address during the talk at the beginning, we will. Otherwise, we'll get to that, as I say, in the last 15 minutes when you can ask the experts. I want to thank everybody for turning up today. If you are watching this video on replay as opposed to live, at the end of the session, we'll give you a link where you can access the HBR article that we've been referring to. And of course, from there, follow up with any other questions you might have. But I'm going to get started right now, if I can, and just by introducing our panel, or rather allowing our panel to introduce themselves if they can. So go here to the HBR story. There was 5 authors that were contributing, and 4 of those are with us here today. And I'm going to start with Ivy. I'm going to ask you, Ivy, if you could introduce yourself and also explain to us how you actually got started in this area of research.
All right, thank you, Mike. My name is Ivy. I'm an assistant professor from Iowa State University. I started research related to digital human when I was in my doctoral program back in 2013. I was interested in anthropomorphism, and it all started with one single picture with 3 rocks, 2 big and 1 little, with googly eyes stick down their face. So I automatically was thinking, this is a very cute family. But wait a second, that's supposed to be rocks. So I automatically thinking it's a family. And what we can do with technology, we can easily put googly eyes or even more facial organs or expressions on them. And that's how I started on the researching anthropomorphism. And then I met Mike and at 2 conferences in 2016, and the rest is history. That's how it goes.
Thanks so much. So, Allan, I'm going to cross to you next. So if you could introduce yourself and also explain how you first got interested in digital humans and AI, because obviously both subject areas are very much related.
Yeah, hi. I'm Allan Dennis. I'm a professor of information systems, and I hold the John T. Chambers Chair of Internet Systems in the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. I got interested in this technology back in the 1980s when I was a doctoral student. And I started playing around with it. I was all excited, and it really wasn't very good back then. I played around with it for about a year and then realized, no, this is not the right time and place for AI technology. So I must admit, I was really excited when Ivy showed me some of the initial things she was thinking of, and when we met you, Mike, and things just took off. So thank you for bringing us all together.
And our last panelist, but by no means our least panelist, Kai, if you want to introduce yourself and also explain, like, when you first thought this might be an interesting area of research to get into for the sort of academic work that you've been doing.
Yeah, so my name is Kai Riemer. I'm professor of information technology and organization and the head of discipline of business information systems at the University of Sydney Business School. So for me, in many ways, what we're doing with digital humans is an extension of my research into how, first of all, humans relate to technology and how humans relate through technology. So I've done a lot of work on collaborative systems and technology that helps teams and people connect. And I came to this topic of digital humans through you, Mike, as you know. So I was organizing Australia's first ever Sydney Digital Disruption Conference back in 2013, which you attended, and you approached me afterwards and you said, I have this great idea for a PhD. And you told me all about what you wanted to do, building a photorealistic digital human representation of yourself, a photo of which is actually behind your head there. And we called it Mike capital letters, and we built the Mate Mike project. So we started in 2013, and in about 4 years, you built this incredible CGI representation of yourself. Back in the day, required all this technology, having your face scanned at UCLA, traveling to Disney in Zurich, having your eyeballs scanned, and all of this incredible work to get to a representation that we then extensively researched, and we showed that we crossed the uncanny valley. And then since then, this whole thing has exploded in popularity and in ease of access with the help of AI and neural rendering. And so we did not expect at the time how fast this would move, but it's great that we were already researching this when this whole field exploded. And in many ways, what we have today is sort of the culmination of that journey. And so I'm incredibly excited and proud that we're here today talking about this. So yeah, so that's how this all worked out, how I came to this at a time when I didn't know much about it, to being on this incredible journey with the three of you.
So obviously, my name is Mike Seymour, if I hadn't worked out already. The reason that we tended to use my head a lot is because I'm free and I have no copyright, and I'm also always available. So let me set the expectation as well about some of the things we're going to discuss and why we're discussing them. So one of the things we want to do is engaged research. And by that, we mean research that isn't just purely academic, but reaches out to industry. And that takes on two interesting aspects. One of it is, how do you do this? And we've had other webinars and other papers that are incredibly technical. We have a paper in the works now, it's like 44 pages, and it's the most dense kind of technical stuff ever. The other side of that coin is also talking to practitioners and people that want to implement this and understand it. And that's where I guess the HBR thing came in. So today we're going to not focus so much on the algorithms of the neural rendering. And trust me, the guys know I can geek out on the tech stuff to the cows come home. But that's important. But if something that Kai taught me early on, which is, the tech itself isn't the answer. It's a combination of the social and the technical. And so sometimes we have to lean on the technical to say how things are done. And certainly we found it super beneficial to work with partners like Epic Games and Pinscreen and like companies around the world like Disney Zurich and stuff over time to look at things a bit ahead of the curve. So as Kai said on the Meet Mike project, and we had 9 computers running to make this work.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is just, making sure that people that are in industry, in organizations, understand this technology and how they can use it. So today's that emphasis is going to be on that. And if you go to the HBR article, it gives a good rundown on the industries and stuff that are being affected and will be affected. And we're going to talk about that more right now. But just to prove my point that in fact, or rather Kai's point, that it used to be really hard and now it's a lot easier. Let's look at what we managed to do in literally a couple of minutes off a laptop. And this is like what is now available to just about anyone. Well, I shouldn't explain this. I'll get a digital version of me to explain it.
Thanks, guys. Well, look, this looks like Mike, but it isn't. I'm a fully digital Mike, being created without any cameras or lights or any kind of programming or coding whatsoever. Using advanced AI, we can produce as much video of me talking like this as we want, just from a laptop. It's a great application of what this would be like perhaps for use in corporate communications. Don't send your staff a 5-page PDF to read, just make a quick video explaining the concept. Again, what you're looking at right now is made in just a couple of minutes by the actual Mike for me to stand in for him, and I think it looks pretty good. But hey, this is something so easy that anyone can do it, and can do it today.
So Allan, I guess the question I'd like to throw to you is, how significant do you think these digital humans are going to be to organizations and businesses over coming years?
I'll say we are at the dawn of a new era. Today, we look back at 1993 as the year that was the demarcation between the internet age and the pre-internet age. 10 years from now, historians will look back at 2022 as the demarcation between the AI age and the pre-AI age. That's how big I think this is. Digital humans and the other AI technologies are going to radically transform how we live, work, learn, and play in the coming years. So much so that we'll look back at the pre-AI era and wonder, how did we ever do that without the AI? This technology will be everywhere. the same way the internet is everywhere today. But of course, it'll take us a little while to get there. The internet age didn't change the world overnight. It took years for us to adapt the technology, change organizations, and change the way we live. We'll see the same thing.
I guess it's obvious that some of this stuff's going to happen in media and entertainment. And as some of you may know, that's certainly my background. But Ivy, I'm wondering, obviously I have a good view on entertainment, but where do you think, or what are the other sectors, I guess, what are the other areas that are going to be affected by these digital humans?
Yeah, as you have mentioned, people were already seeing in gaming industry, entertainment, and movie industry. I think it will slowly get into sales and online commercials and online customer service and all those other industries. I think any industry would need customized services, would have a space for digital human to play a fact.
Yeah, because I guess, Ivy, there's the perception that this is just going to be kind of a little narrow. But in our HBR article, we saw a lot of different industry sectors that looked like it was going to either are or already experimenting and moving forward with these things.
Yes, like Zuzu Japan already using virtual, like salesperson representative of commercial styles and then sell products in that way. And we also have virtual influencers online, like Michaela selling a lifestyle and selling products and that kind of images to the customer. So it's going to be more and more coming, and I feel like eventually with GPT, we're going to see more like creative writing and a lot of programming even in that area. So we're going to have space for digital employees to grow.
So Kai, Ivy was mentioning there, examples that are, I guess, consumer, like influencers and sort of stuff like that, maybe in retail. Where do you think people, where are these digital humans going to be used, and like, who's going to come in contact with them first? And is that going to change at all over time? What's your thoughts?
I could answer in just a word. I think they're everywhere. So I think we will see various different kinds of digital humans, and they will feel quite differently, and they'll serve different purposes in various parts of both society and more narrowly business. So there'll be digital humans that will live on social media, on the internet, that will give people the ability to express themselves in new ways, try on clothes, be influencers for fashion. We're already seeing this with stills. Increasingly, this will be animated with short videos, the ability to create those at home, but also to basically have digital human avatars in, virtual worlds, the metaverse. If this ever becomes a thing. But more interestingly, there'll be heaps of applications in the business world. So the way in which we offer new ways to interact, for consumers to interact with us, right? We do know that customers really hate these automated robocall things where, you press 1, you press 3, and you basically have to create a mental map in your head of, the decision tree and whatever. And it's really difficult, and it creates cognitive load. It'd be much easier to just log on to an app and have a digital human to talk with, and then talk through a problem. And many problems will be solved with the logic that the company puts behind it in a way that feels much more natural and much more engaging and much less, depersonalized. So it will feel this sort of idea that you're being kept at arm's length with a core robot will go away. And then this digital human can politely hand over to a real human when, things become too difficult, and where, the human judgment and problem solving or, the human empathy is needed. We'll see this in team contexts, assistants that will help teams on Zoom calls. And we'll see this in areas that, we don't necessarily expect this, like in therapy. We'll see it in various different ways in the medical profession. always where it makes sense, right? Because we're in a moment where the visual, even the audio representation, synthetic voices, slightly gallop ahead of what we can do with the actual cognitive logic behind it. So businesses will ask themselves quite sort of measured questions as to where it makes sense to put these digital humans. There are not a solution for every context, but they can actually solve a few of these problems where we have to provide advice and interaction at scale, but cannot possibly have real humans interact. So to bring back a little bit of that human touch and feel into areas that are now very depersonalized.
And you bring up a bunch of really good points there. And I think one of the things I find so fascinating about this area is the number of ways you can slice the problem. So, for example, we started out by discussing we were doing work back in the day that was CG. It was like, the traditional CG approach of designing something that you model, you then texture it, you then light it, and then you render it. And of course, the newer AI neural inferencing work, the work where it actually infers what the image would look like, doesn't use that technique. So that's a technical slice. But Kai, maybe you could also talk to the fact there's like the difference between, say, an avatar and an actor, which is something that is also like a bit different.
Yeah, so the avatar is just when I drive the appearance, I could just, instead of talking with my real face now, I could have a different personality, and that, comes both with opportunities and with certain challenges ethically. Me impersonating someone, for example. And then there's the agent model where it's a digital human, fully digital, where a logic and AI engine or a large language model might drive the interaction, where I'm not actually interacting with the human through a virtual representation avatar, but with a fully synthetic entity, a digital human. But also, let me say, the other thing that I find quite interesting is that, as you said, quite a few years ago, not too many years ago, we still had to put a lot of effort into creating one digital human, right, with CGI and all that. Now we can create these representations almost in minutes, which means that there will be different ways in which these digital humans will be created. There will be some that will be personalities, where a company might have a digital employee, almost like a representative, a digital persona that might actually, live on for a long time and becomes known by the customer base. But there will also be instances where you can create ad hoc and ephemeral digital humans that will only exist for a short period of time in entertainment context, in social media, and things like that, for better and for worse, because these can be used for really fun contexts, but they can, of course, also be used to, further add to the whole pile of misinformation and disinformation. And we need to be aware of that and be aware early so that we can, put the required safeguards in place. But I do think we will see all different kinds of applications, many of which we might not necessarily anticipate at this moment. As Allan said, we're at this sort of crossroads where things are just exploding into existence.
Actually, Allan, before we have a look at some examples, the other thing I think is an interesting slice is that some of these things are like pre-recorded, as in if it's in a film, in a video that you make as a training video, but other times they're interactive. And that's interesting, hasn't it? Because we've seen that people kind of do respond a bit differently and can have really interesting levels of engagement if you've got a realistic interactive versus just watching a video.
Yeah, that's true. One of the easiest things to create is the pre-recorded video, as you showed us, Mike, at the start. That technology today is solid. It's there. You talked about pre-recording a video to use in training. Yes, we can do that. The interactive nature of it becomes a little bit more difficult because one of the problems is we need to have an AI brain behind it. And if we have, as Kai said, if we have a really good, realistic looking human face and voice, are we going to expect a realistic intelligence behind it? And how are we going to react when it makes stupid chatbot mistakes if we've just slapped a digital human on a chatbot? Maybe we'll be fine with it, or maybe the mistakes made by the digital human will be much more sharply felt when it appears more realistic. We don't know.
Yeah, so let's have a look at some of those images right now. These are some of the ones that were from companies that we were researching and talking about in the article. These are from Zuzutown from Pinscreen. So Pinscreen makes the technology that the retailer Zuzutown uses. And the reason that they're doing these digital humans here is to show things that you can buy in their online store. But obviously, instead of just showing a picture of a t-shirt, they show somebody wearing that t-shirt as in the middle shot. And this is really significant because you want to have fabric and you want to have a sense of movement of that fabric to reduce the returns as much as anything. So one interesting aspect of this is just how much you can save by actually having somebody buy the right thing. You don't have to then have the returns, you don't have the wasted shipping, you don't have the environmental impact of that, or the waste that comes around all of that. So that's an interesting area. Some of the work that Soul Machines has been doing in New Zealand is incredible in producing the interactive stuff that Allan was talking about. Interactive assistants, be them anywhere from the World Health Organization to various airlines and other organizations that want to have some kind of interactivity going on. And these are all driven in real time. A common technology that has become really powerful in the last, I'm going to say year, is stuff from Epic Games. Their MetaHumans has been a way of anyone really being able to produce a three-dimensional, as in a computer model that is either modeled by them or from one that they kind of make in a digital jigsaw puzzle that they put together. And then these can be used as models in the Unreal Engine in an interactive environment, or they could be taken and used in a non-real-time environment and rendered out. But there's a huge amount of work that Epic Games has been doing in providing tools to allow people to make these 3D images. And then another company that we mentioned in the story was Digital Domain. Now, this is a visual effects company, and Digital Domain has done a huge amount of work in realistic characters. I mean, they did Thanos in the Avengers, for those of you that watch the Marvel films. But here, what they've got is a real-time interactive digital assistant. And on the left of your screen is Zoe. And Zoe would appear, if you wanted her to, in a Zoom call as your digital assistant. And you would engage with Zoe and ask her questions. Maybe she would take notes. She would listen in for you to ask her things and then be able to provide you with additional help in that Zoom call. And on the right-hand side, you see two of the key developers from Digital Domain in this area. And above their Digital Doug, which was the first version of that interactive tool that listened in, contributed. And the work Digital Domain here is doing is, covering a lot of those areas. And then just to round this out, this is the example that I think you gave, Ivy, of digital clothes. So on the left-hand side, this is a demonstration that Pinscreen had at South by Southwest, where you would just appear, it would make a digital version of you, and you could see what the clothes would look like on you. And on the right, you see that digital screen as a kiosk at South by Southwest. So some good examples there of what's happening and what these things look like. And I think we'd all agree they no longer look like the creepy, cheesy, bad computer game things that some people imagine from a few years ago. Okay, so that's what they look like. Let's talk about that other thing that was mentioned a moment ago, which is how they react. And Kai, I'm going to ask you, ChatGPT is in the press. It's obviously an incredibly interesting area of AI. And because it's conversational, how does that interact with what we're talking about with digital humans?
Yeah, interesting question. We don't know yet, but we can imagine what this will look like. I mean, those technologies are only just becoming available, but we've been talking about what it takes to create a digital human that behaves in ways that are not off-putting, right? If we have a realistic face, if we have a realistic synthetic voice, we do want some kind of logic behind it that feels really good. And we can do this sort of for a virtual assistant that is an advisor in a bounded knowledge area, like a subject matter expert on, I don't know, flight bookings, for example. We can build that with a traditional, more or less rule-based engine, and we can give it the intelligence, in quote marks, to basically knowledgeable in that particular area. But if we want something that is more like a companion that can, engage on a wide range of topics, we need a different engine behind that. And those large language models promise to be just that kind of technology. But it's not going to be trivial to actually connect those language models with the visual engine and create digital humans out of them, because it needs a different training layer. ChatGPT is optimized for a text-based chat, and the answers that are coming back are basically sometimes fairly long-winded. They're also sometimes a little bit, they have a fairly sort of sanitized genre. They're non-offensive. They sometimes feel natural, but they read well on a screen. But if you read them out as a digital human, it would feel very artificial, very sort of, what's the word? Sort of wooden, right? So you need to actually then put a different training layer on top. Yeah, but you can do this now. We now gain the understanding of what it takes to take a large language model like GPT-3 or GPT-4 and put this layer of human-trained engine on top, which has given us ChatGPT. So it's not going to be long before someone actually makes the connection to a digital human that will then be able to engage in a wide range of conversations much more naturally, always with the caveat that these are language models, not knowledge models, right? It's still not going to be correct, but it's probably going to be entertaining, right? And because we can train GPT on all matters of genres, the opportunities that are there for entertainment are probably much more exciting than the opportunities for GPT as a knowledge base, which has all kinds of problems, as we know. But in a companion kind of context, where you're just having a fun conversation with these entities, that might not matter as much, and you can then use the model to make it, have a companion that can talk in the language of Shakespeare, or can impersonate a character from a computer game or things like that. So I think the opportunities are quite exciting, and before long, people will experiment with this for sure.
Well, I'm going to ask people to post questions in the Q&A and in the chat, but we're already getting some questions coming through. And Ivy, I'm going to throw one to you, which is like, there's naturally a concern that people have that this is going to be taking jobs. So is this digital humans with AI that Kai's discussing, is this all going to wreak havoc on the job market?
Personally, as a mother, I'm really worried if my kids growing up, whether they're going to have a job in this world or they're going to be all replaced by AI. From my understanding, my personal opinion, I don't think digital human is going to replace humans and taking people's jobs away. I think it will serve as an interrupter technology, and will cause some short-term years of we get used to it, we justify ourselves, we relocate our talent and knowledge, we change our education system to adjust ourselves into this new technology and move on. Like human history has already shown us. But overall, I don't think it's going to take human jobs. But it will definitely reveal some certain areas of skill or knowledge base that needs to be strengthened, need to be taken priority in teaching our younger generations coming up. For ChatGPT, I was very surprised to see it when it comes out, because when the pre-ChatGPT era, people were thinking, the creative workers, the idea makers, the innovative writers, the programmers, they have the most job security in the world because they are creative and linked to innovation. Then ChatGPT comes and makes them question, so even their job is not secure as they may think. But I think that's very interesting. As I was very surprised by this technology. I was already amazed by the potential of it. But if you really use the technology, you will see it's still building a lot of data, and to reorganize the data creative ideas we already have, and present it in a way we have. So I feel like the source of that creativity innovation is still coming from humans. So in that sense, I don't think creative workers innovation can ever be replaced by, at least not by ChatGPT. for now.
So, Allan, we got another follow-up question about people. It's a same question, I guess, about jobs in telehealth. And I guess my question to you is slightly different than building on that. Like, is this going to just reinforce stereotypes because we're going to have these, perfect people that are just, professorial looking older white males in lab coats? I mean, is this, how do you see this in playing into just issues of inclusion?
So one of the cool things about digital humans is they can look and sound like anyone, which of course now poses a really important design decision for organizations. If they can look and sound like anyone, who should they look and sound like? Organizations now have to start thinking about, as they build this technology, what age, what gender, what ethnicity do I want to put as the face of my organization? You could think, for example, in telehealth, maybe people would relate better to a healthcare provider who looks like them. So the question is, should we let the consumer choose what the digital human is so that I can go in and customize it the same way, I can customize the technology I have in my office. But that raises some really important questions. If I let you customize the technology, are you going to customize it to look like you? Or are you going to customize what you think a telehealth worker should look like? And maybe you have some stereotypes, and now we let you reinforce these harmful stereotypes.
Almost sounds like a research question there, Allan.
I would say it is. And that's actually one of the things that we're looking at right now. And the short answer is, if you let people choose, they tend to choose people who look like themselves. They we haven't yet looked at a variety of different industries, but they may customize these digital humans to look like what they think somebody should look like. Because Ivy joked about, is there going to be jobs in the creative jobs? If I was going to Hollywood and they were going to cast somebody in the role of a professor, guess who they would cast? They would cast somebody that looks like me, old white male, gray beard and all that. So if we let people reinforce stereotypes like that, is this a good thing? Is this ethical? So we don't have answers to that. And of course, what happens if we now start exposing people to digital humans that don't fit the stereotype? Is that going to be jarring? Or is that going to create more diversity, equity, and inclusion because people will start seeing non-stereotypical humans doing certain roles? It's a fantastic research question.
But Allan, also, there's no reason why we have to pick one, right? As you're sort of alluding to just then, right? Like, while an organization may choose to pick a representative, by the same token, surely we could have me picking somebody different to Ivy, different to you, different to Kai.
Yeah, and it could be, in fact, if we look at STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math, most professors in the STEM area happen to be old white males. So one of the reasons why we see so few minorities and women going into STEM occupations might be because they don't have role models. They don't see themselves holding these roles. So if we were suddenly to separate who is your instructor from who is teaching a lesson, for example, and we dropped in some diverse female professors in teaching STEM education, would those be important role models? And especially if we push this into lower school grades so that the younger children would see STEM educators who look like them, would we suddenly change the face of what STEM looks like 30 years from now?
What do you think, Kai?
Well, I think where there's opportunities, there's also, as Allan said, ethical questions, right? We might find out from data what works best, and that can be both a blessing and a problem, right? So we might find out that certain representations help certain people best in therapy. And that might actually be a good thing to say we pick the kind of representation, the kind of digital representation that works best for a particular patient. But that also comes with certain questions. So go to education, our field, right? If we figure out what kind of representation works best for people to learn from, and as a virtual tutor or virtual lecturer, that might raise all kinds of questions, right? If it is indeed the Allan bearded professor male stereotypical professor persona that people learn best from, how do you actually square that up with a female colleague being in charge of the course, but the data says that particular cohort learns best from a male lecturer and tutor? Where's the fairness in that, and what are the ethical implications? What do you actually do? Do you tell your colleague, oh, tough luck, we know these people learn best from this particular persona, or do you actually still expose the students to the full breadth of the people who are actually knowledgeable in the field and who teach? I mean, I know what I would come down on, right? But it is very hard to argue against, the data that shows how students learn best. So you then have two competing objectives, right? And you have to have very robust discussions about what education is about. Is it just about how people engage with the content, or isn't it also about creating informed citizens that are exposed to the full breadth of humanity in the classroom, right? And all of those questions will have to be not only researched, but also be grappled with by businesses and organizations, right? And we need to be aware at this moment in time that this will be coming.
Yeah. Well, if I could play off that notion of diversity, from my own point of view, one of the interesting areas is language. Now, I'm terrible at languages, but one of the things that I've always thought is unreasonable is that how much we tend to get dominated by the movies and entertainment and communications that are in our language, and we don't get to enjoy other languages. And of course, you can do subtitles and you can do dubbing, but those are problematic at best and can be quite amusing, if not odd at times. So I'm going to show you a quick project that we did now that took this using digital humans in a different way, which was not so much to introduce a completely synthetic person, but just change somebody that already existed. And so this is from a feature film called The Champion, and I'll just give you a quick clip explaining that project.
Hi, I'm Maciej Barczewski, the director of The Champion, the very first feature film synced with the groundbreaking technology from Adapt Entertainment. This technology could change the whole paradigm of international filmmaking.
Znam cię. Wołali na ciebie Teddy jak na boksera z Ameryki.
They called you Teddy like the boxer from America.
It often happens that while you have to read subtitles, you lose some of the message of the film. That will happen no more here. We were able to recreate the original experience, bringing the original cast enhanced for a much wider audience.
Hi, my name is Piotr Głowacki. I'm an actor from Poland. I'm surrounded through 5 cameras. They're reading my face. They would take my mouth, my face, and put in a picture. On the 3rd full moon after the summer solstice, Zeus set up the Olympics.
Trzecią pełnię po przesileniu letnim.
Zeus set up the Olympics. All participants had to take an oath in front of his statue.
The really interesting thing about the Champion project is that this new neural rendering technology developed by Pinscreen in LA is actually part of a production pipeline. So you can do literally hundreds of shots in a full production environment with very high quality. It's not as if we haven't seen work done where we've got a short clip with dialogue replacement or maybe a test, but they often have a requirement of lots of training data or some specialist setup on set. But here we only work with the final feature film. Plus, when recording the actors doing the new dialogue, it's very unintrusive. There's just a small number of cameras around them. They don't have to have any special makeup. We don't change the lighting. It's all just sitting there recording them very naturally. But from that, we can then put their new dialogue into scenes with dramatically different facial angles, camera angles, lighting, and even prosthetic makeup.
I'm not a champion. Not yet. You fight for us. For all of us. You fight for us. For all of us.
This pioneering project we're doing with Adapt Entertainment will allow our film to be seen by a much larger audience in many other countries. I hope that the message of the champion will resonate more profoundly.
So obviously one of the things that is interesting about this now is we're talking about actually changing people, in this case, respectfully and with their permission, to be revoiced and do different things. So there's like a huge pantheon of stuff in this area of digital humans, which is why, as Ivy said earlier, it affects so many areas. But we had a question that I thought was kind of interesting, came up in the chat about whether or not we should have a choice in picking digital humans. And I think it's a good point, like, should you be able to choose whether to use a digital human or not? We don't want to imply, and certainly our article in HBR does not state that digital humans are the solution to everything. In fact, we say that there's a bunch of cases where you don't want a digital human, and we even give a sort of logic to where you might think about that. But Ivy, I was going to go across to you to discuss this sort of range now, just in terms of applications. And in the same paper, we did have a 2x2 diagram, which I'll just put up on the screen, which was discussing whether or not it was a long-term ongoing relationship in the vertical, or whether it was just a much more short-term thing. And the left to right was whether it was very task-focused or whether it was very experience-focused. And the one that sort of sits in the top right, which is probably the most interesting to some people, is this idea of a virtual companion, an ongoing personal relationship. It's very experiential. I was wondering if you could talk to that for us.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite cell. It's the virtual companion. And I feel like that's the most challenging type of digital human we can create. And I really think that reveals the true value of digital humans, is this having this long-going relationship with a human being. I'll give you two examples. One is the aged care, the senior care, when people having cognitive decline or have Alzheimer or other illness due to age, they may not remember what happened 5 minutes ago, but what happened 15, 20 years ago may be super vivid in their memory. In that case, if, for example, if we can show to my grandmother my face when I was like very young as a baby, that will definitely recall some beautiful and warm memory for her. And that's one use of digital companionship, but just bring back that memory and having this long relationship connection with the patient, with the elders citizen. Another thing is, because I'm a mom, the kids learn a great deal amount of things from their peers, and the teachers, what even a teacher looking like their peer, they may be able to learn more and better from their teachers compared with that. That's just one or two examples of what digital companionship can be. And I think the emphasizing that 2x2 is forming this long-going relationship and closeness. It's not like a transaction. It's very be there for the mental support and care.
Yeah, and that's a very good example from aged care. And so, Allan, if we go to the other quadrant for a second, in the opposite corner, which is something that's very task-focused, much more sort of short-term, like a call center agent or something like that. Do you want to like maybe give us your thoughts on that sort of completely different type of digital human?
Yeah, I think the place where we will first see these widely deployed is as a virtual agent. Any place that we see chatbots today, wait 2 years, we'll see digital humans, because they are really a good replacement for a chatbot. So simple things like customer service, tech support, call center, anything where you'd see a chatbot.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an interesting area, and of course, some of those short-term things really can be still quite an emotional engagement, in the sense that you're quite leaning into it, right? It's not necessarily just straight transactional. But if we get to be a little bit more of an ongoing kind of relationship, we move into that top quadrant, which is like the virtual assistant. And we listed a number of categories there. I guess, Kai, if I could get you to talk to the virtual assistant aspect of these 4x4s, 2x2, sorry.
Yeah, sure. So I think, as Ivy said, the ongoing relationship aspect is really important here. And that's probably the hardest to solve with AI at this point. If you think about ChatGPT, ChatGPT has a little bit of memory because in the same session, it remembers things. So you can talk to it, for a few minutes and a few interactions and exchanges, and it will remember things that you said before. But you close the window and you come back the next day, and you're basically starting from scratch. So the challenge here is, how do we build memory into these virtual humans, these digital humans, to make them useful beyond the task-based interaction, right? If I have a sales process, as Allan said, for the virtual agent, if I have a sales process, every transaction is sort of largely the same. You start from scratch. But if we have a companion or an assistant, we want to have that memory, and we want to come back the next day and still draw on the conversation we had yesterday. In the companion one, that can be just on all kinds of wide-ranging social things. But when we talk assistant, we want this to be task focused. We want this to be useful. So if I have a virtual assistant in whatever field or area that might be, it could be like in a normal office context, but it could also be in telehealth, then we want this entity to know the history and to pick up where we left off. And this is sort of tying in with the question that Brenda had on the Q&A chat. Could this take the place of humans in telehealth? I do think it is an addition, because it allows us to do things sometimes that we don't normally, that we can't actually do. With the companion, in the case of the companion, as Ivy said, we can create companions for Alzheimer patients of younger versions of their relatives, for example. Now, this is not something that you can actually do in telehealth. Equally, we found, research has found by Skip Rizzo, for example, who we also talk to a lot, that war veterans, young people really, that come back from active engagement in war zones, who are deeply traumatized, find it incredibly hard to open up to their human sort of clinicians. And research has shown that they're much more likely to open up to a machine, because a machine doesn't judge, right? So we actually find that we can use these virtual assistants to deploy them in areas that humans actually can't actually fulfill, right? So they can fulfill a need where humans can't go, because they can't make themselves look like someone from the past. Or it's found that, machines are actually sometimes much more useful than actual humans, who then come in off the back of that, because, of course, it takes a human clinician to then come up with diagnostics and programs for therapy once we've learned from the interaction with the virtual agent what the patient actually needs and what the best course of action is. So I'm a little bit more optimistic here. Yes, efficiency might drive these things into areas where we might have had humans before. But we need to actually see this in the context of a megatrend towards an aging population and changing demographics. We do know that we will need way more care delivery in the coming years, because we do have an aging population, and we will have a shortage of people actually moving into these professions. So I think at this point in time, we're probably lucky to have these technologies at our disposal to deliver care at scale in the face of a shortage of human workers. But this needs to be an area of attention. Let me finish by saying that virtual assistants, of course, have all kinds of usefulness in being, a calendar assistant in virtual Zoom calls, or as customer representatives, where consumers have more long-term relationships with their sales representatives. representative where, you know, the assistant can draw on the service history or on the purchase history, and therefore become more useful than the chatbot that only wants to do the next transaction, right? But doesn't have a history of previous purchases and things like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. I guess it befalls me to talk to that last quadrant, which is the virtual influencer, the social influencer. And I guess we know that one pretty well. It's somewhere like little Michaela, a digital character. And I think what's really interesting here, and this completely ties into a question we just got on the Q&A, which was a discussion around whether these people have to be realistic digital humans and whether we could have, you know, stylized digital humans. And the reason that connects for me is Michaela, or little Michaela, the digital influencer, 3 million followers on Instagram, huge success. But she came out a few years ago, actually, and so she's progressed as the technology's progressed. Now, when she first came out, she didn't look indistinguishable from live action. She looked like she was digital. She was enough across the uncanny valley that nobody was repulsed by her, in the sense that you can get with the uncanny valley if you see something that's kind of horrendous. And Ivy is our what is it, canary in the cave here, or the coal mine here, that she's the one that reacts most violently to bad digital humans. But Michaela didn't do that, but she didn't look real. And so I had a chance to talk to the team that was working on her, and I sort of commented, well, she's been out now for a few years. Every year technology improves and she gets to look a bit more realistic. And I said, you know, does the audience mind that she's kind of changing as the rendering tech makes her more realistic from a more stylized version? And they went, oh, no, you don't understand. The audience doesn't care that she isn't real. They just care that she's authentic. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I've joked before that I want to put that on a t-shirt. It's not that the audience needs them to be photoreal. They just need them to be authentic. To be authentic, you need to have a certain amount of realism. And our research amongst the team here has actually been exploring this and actually doing, you know, proper quantitative analysis of people's responses. And we found, I think you'd agree, Allan, we found that more realistic is actually, for example, more trustworthy.
Indeed, the more human realistic a digital human is, the more people tend to trust it. We transfer our trust to humans to a digital human.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Now, of course, there's another unusual side effect of this, maybe another one of these research topics that we've stumbled across today, which is that if you make them so real, then they just look like a real person, at which point maybe some of the appeal of it being a digital character isn't there. I think it's Battle Buddy, which is the latest incarnation from the work of Skip Rizzo's team that Kai mentioned, is I believe it's only come out really recently, but it's a very successful program for dealing not only with post-traumatic stress disorder, but actually suicide prevention with veterans. And it's kind of important in that context that it doesn't look like a real person, because in some point, you know, if it's a real person, then why not be a real person? If it's still a digital representation, then you know that you have the safeguard that you're not going to be judged because it's not a person. So ironically, there is a role for being realistic, but not necessarily photoreal, as much as there is this great advantage in getting more realistic for more realism. So it's an interesting area. And again, we can cover both of those areas, because the 3D stuff that we're seeing still looks to most people's eyes to be digital. And then some of the work we're doing in neural rendering and AI and machine learning is pretty much imperceptible from reality. And so before we go to the Q&A, I'm going to show you one more clip. This is actually it was literally completed this morning. So this is like about 30 minutes old. This is an example of the latest test that we've been doing in converting, like it's a stage on from that stuff you saw with the champion. Instead of just having the face changed, we're going to change the face and the voice. And of course, we're using me again because I'm the universal guinea pig. This is just a short test we've done with our friends at Pinscreen in LA and with Respeecher in the Ukraine. Hi, I'm Mike Seymour, and I'm not actually talking. In fact, I'm standing here on set, not saying a word. My lips aren't moving. Now, it looks like I'm talking because of this footage that we shot the other day. This allows a machine learning AI to infer what I would look like if I was talking. So it's analyzing the footage that we shot previously and then making it look like I'm talking on set right now. We call this facial reenactment, and it allows the computer to come up with a very plausible lip-synced version of audio, even though, as I say, I'm standing here on set, literally not saying anything. In fact, I'm not going to say anything for the rest of this entire clip. Now, I'm driving me at this stage effectively, but anyone could drive me. Oh, hi Grant.
Hey Mike. As you can see, I'm now driving Mike's face. And since I speak different languages, I can make Mike speak different languages. Mike ne sait pas parler français, mais moi je me débrouille assez bien. Et avec mon aide, Mike peut parler français. But the problem is that you're still hearing my voice coming from Mike and not Mike's voice. But thanks to Respeecher, we can use AI not just to drive Mike's face, but also to drive his voice.
So now you're hearing my voice converted to sound like Mike. Eh oui, ça veut dire que Mike peut parler une langue qu'il libre. Il peut le faire en ressemblant à une mienne. What you're seeing now is my face and my voice driving Mike. And at no point in this clip has Mike standing here said a single word. I don't even know I am standing here, mate.
Okay, just a bit of fun, but also just points to the fact that we can and will be seeing massive advances in this technology, month after month, week after week, as stuff moves forward. But I do want to quickly get to Matt's question, which was a question about eye contact and the difference between a 2D rendering and a 3D context and how important eye contact is. And one of the technologies that NVIDIA has actually been working on is changing a zoom call. So if I was looking here, but my camera was up here, it would actually take a digital version like we did with the mouth, but with your eyes, and make it look like my eyes were actually up at the camera. But Ivy, maybe you could talk to that idea about engagement and the fact that these digital humans can actually look at us and nod and give us kind of symbols, just increases that sort of, I guess, unspoken engagement that happens with normal conversation.
Yeah, eye contact is important. I think it's essence of human interactions. We look at eye, we decode all the microfacial expressions and try to convey through through the eyes and our face. And what's the difference between 2D render and 3D and VR context? I think based on our study results, like there is a difference if there is more realism, more affinity towards the digital human in the 3D VR environment, but I do feel like we need to slowly break that wall of VR context, right? It's not really great to have that goggle and eye, our face. I think if we can bring that realism affinity into the 2D rendered environment, I think that will be more usable and easier to implement and to get our users more engaged.
We have time for just one last question. We're only going slightly over time, but I'm going to throw this to Allan. It's a question about virtual resurrectionism, which is to say a virtual being recreated of a lost one or a friend, or for that matter, a mentor, and scraping information obviously from social media to put that together. Do we have an opinion on this idea of seeing someone that's passed?
I have really no good suggestions. So I wish you'd called on somebody else, Mike, but let me try anyway. I know people who have lost loved ones, and it is great to hold on to some mementos from them. Would it be great to hold on to a digital human representation of someone that you've lost? I think for some people that would be very powerful and very helpful in dealing with the loss. I don't think it's probably for everyone, but I could see how that would be a very important application for the people for whom it would help.
I think
there is already
research.
There is actually really interesting areas in people that are having shut-in syndrome, where basically they are fully cognitively aware, but their body is letting them down and be able to communicate with the outside world. And already people are banking their voices. So as they have deteriorated actual ability to articulate words, but mentally completely aware, they can use technology to speak in a voice. But again, as Kai said with the earlier thing, we get these ethics things popping up and time again. If I had a burn on the side of my face, I could digitally remove that in a Zoom call. But is that a good idea or a bad idea? It's a good idea if it makes me feel I can go out more because I'm self-conscious. Might be a bad idea if we start reinforcing stereotypes of perfect sort of appearance and stuff. It's again, one of the reasons that we're so happy to do this work is there are just so many angles for this research.
If people get used to not seeing people with disabilities in public forums, that is not necessarily a good thing. On the resurrectionism, I think we need to do very careful research, and it needs to be research in the medical profession to actually see whether this helps or does more harm. It might help people in the short term, but maybe it's not actually useful for getting over a trauma in the long term. If the actual loss is never fully comprehended because we have these companions, and does it actually help people in the long term? These are open questions which we don't know. And yes, it might be one thing for one type of person and another for another. But it will take very careful research, because the ethics of doing experiments in this field obviously quite immense, because you can do harm with this as well. And the other is one of consent, right? When I die, or in my last will I then have to actually specify how my digital memory lives on? We already see issues around digital death, what happens to social media accounts and the past that is there, in taking all those accounts, having them live on or having them deleted. Can I give, or would I have to give consent in the future for my digital persona to be resurrected after my death? And all of these questions are new and haven't been answered yet. So it's a really interesting and important field to look into.
Well, we need to wrap it up there. I'm going to put up the URL for the HBR article, but we'll just quickly go around and say thank you. And also final words. Ivy, do you have any final comment you wanted to make?
We're excited about digital human, and we are continuing doing research on this. So please join us and to make more research in this area and make the world a better place, I think.
Allan?
I'll echo Ivy. There's lots of things we don't know, and we look forward to working with everybody who's interested in digital humans to learn a lot more about this phenomenon.
Yes, we are incredibly collaborative. We really enjoy engaged research. And Kai?
Yeah, what they said, right? An extension as a sort of a welcome to join us in this research endeavor, because the questions that this new technology raises are far too many for the four of us to all research, but we're always happy to connect, to help out, or to do collaborative research in and around the Motors Lab that we have and the broader collaborations that we have in this space. So it's exciting to move forward.
And I just want to thank Indiana University and all the team that helped put the webinar together. And thank you guys so much for attending. And if you're watching this on the replay, again, feel free to contact us. That's it for us. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time, we look forward to the next chance to engage on the topic. Thanks, guys.